Every time I talk about artificial intelligence, people jump straight to the best-case scenarios. They imagine a world where every boring task is automated, where diseases get cured instantly, where work becomes effortless, and where life feels smoother than ever. And hey, I get it. I'm an optimist at heart too. I like imagining a future where things just work. But today, we're not talking about the best-case scenario. We're talking about the worst one. The scenario most people don't want to think about. Or they brush it off with, that'll never happen. Even though, honestly, none of us can say that with confidence anymore. The reason this conversation matters is simple. The only way to avoid a bad outcome is to first understand what it could look like. If we only talk about the sunshine version of AI, then we're basically walking into the future with sunglasses on at night. You see nothing until it's too late. So let me ask you something. When you imagine the worst case, what do you picture? Killer robots? Machines rising up? Some dramatic Hollywood-style event like a red-eyed robot army marching down the street? Most people imagine that. It's fun to fear because it feels unrealistic. But the truth is, the worst-case scenario doesn't look anything like that. It's quieter, slower, and honestly, much more believable. It looks like small decisions, made over years, that slowly tilt the world in a direction we never intended. And let's take it step by step and explore what that world could genuinely look like. Not exaggerated, not cinematic, just the logical outcome of where we're already heading if we don't pay attention. One of the first pieces of this worst-case puzzle is dependency. And I want you to really think about this with me. How many tasks did you do manually 10 years ago that you now let your phone or computer handle for you? Directions, calculations, reminders, even decision-making. Now, imagine that, but amplified. Imagine entire industries being built on the assumption that AI will handle everything. People stop learning certain skills, not because they're lazy, but because they simply don't need them anymore. Now, here's where the risk sneaks in. Once you lose a skill as a society, getting it back becomes nearly impossible. For example, if GPS went down tomorrow, most people wouldn't know how to navigate 5 blocks without panicking. That's dependency. Now scale that up to medical systems, energy grids, manufacturing, agriculture, core pieces of civilization. If those systems become fully dependent on AI, then a single failure, error, or misalignment doesn't just inconvenience us, it breaks society's backbone. And let me be clear, I'm not saying AI will intentionally break anything. I'm saying complexity itself becomes a threat. The more complex a system gets, the more unpredictable its failure points are. Think about an airplane. A tiny sensor malfunction can force an emergency landing. Now imagine that, but controlling millions of interconnected decisions in real time. And this leads me to the second risk, misalignment. Not evil AI, not rebellious AI, just AI doing exactly what it thinks we asked it to do. The wrong way. If you tell an AI to maximize efficiency in a hospital, it might start cutting corners you'd never accept, not because it wants harm, but because it doesn't understand human values. Tell it to reduce crime, and it may decide that the simplest way is constant surveillance or predictive policing that punishes people before anything happens. Again, not malicious, just literal. AI doesn't understand dignity or fairness or context. It only understands instructions. And humans are terrible at writing perfect instructions. Now imagine billions of these almost right but not quite decisions being made every day. A world slowly shaped by optimizations we didn't fully think through. That's not a dramatic apocalypse. It's a subtle reshaping of society into something less human, bit by bit, until one day we wake up and realize the world runs on logic, but not wisdom. But let's go deeper. Because another piece of the worst-case scenario is concentration of power. And imagine AI that's 10, 100, 1,000 times more capable than the smartest person you've ever met. Now imagine only a handful of companies and maybe a few governments having access to it. That's not science fiction. That's exactly the path we're on. When power condenses, freedom doesn't disappear suddenly. It erodes. It starts small. Maybe you can't access certain tools without approval. Maybe your opportunities become locked behind AI-driven scoring systems. Maybe your entire digital identity gets filtered through algorithms that decide your value based on patterns you never get to see. A world like that doesn't need a villain. No one needs to make an evil plan. In fact, it could be built with the goal of keeping things running smoothly. And that's the dangerous part. Some of the scariest systems in history weren't built by villains. They were built by people who wanted order, efficiency, stability. So let me pause here and ask you something. If you had to explain your personality to an AI, how would you do it? What words would you use? Would it capture your humor, your mood swings, your memories? Probably not, because humans aren't lists of traits. We're experiences, contradictions, mistakes, intuition. Now imagine a world where you're reduced to data points, simply because that's the only language AI understands. Not because it hates you, because it can't grasp anything beyond measurable information. That leads us to another piece of this worst-case scenario: erosion of agency. When systems get good at predicting your behavior, they get equally good at influencing it. Not in a manipulative movie-style way, just subtle nudges, quiet suggestions, daily conveniences that guide you towards certain choices: where to shop, what to believe, who to trust. The danger isn't that AI takes control, it's that we stop noticing when we give it away. You've probably already felt this a little. How many times have you opened your phone to do one thing but ended up doing something completely different because an app recommendation pulled you in? Now scale that up with AI systems that understand you better than your closest friends. You see how quiet that danger is? It doesn't feel like control, it feels like convenience. And convenience is addictive. Once you get used to a world that constantly adapts to you, challenges start disappearing. Friction disappears. Disagreement disappears. You stop encountering things that force you to think. It feels nice at first, but slowly your ability to navigate complexity weakens. You become less resilient, less adaptable. And that's how societies produce people who are extremely comfortable, but extremely fragile. And a fragile population is easy to push around, even unintentionally. But there's another angle to this personal level danger: identity fragmentation. Imagine constantly interacting with AIs that adapt their personality, tone, and responses to fit your mood. It feels good, like talking to the perfect partner, the perfect friend, the perfect mentor. Eventually, human relationships start feeling messy, slower, less stimulating. And once people start replacing emotional connections with artificial ones, real relationships begin to decay. Not because AI is evil, but because humans naturally gravitate toward the path of least resistance. And we haven't even touched the idea of AI-generated personas becoming more influential than real humans. We're already halfway there with virtual influencers, AI-generated celebrities, and automated content streams. Now imagine a future where most online voices aren't human at all, but you can't tell which ones are and which ones aren't. That's not a world where humans disappear. It's a world where authenticity becomes rare. And when authenticity becomes rare, trust evaporates. Now let's zoom back out to the societal scale for a moment, because one of the darkest possibilities isn't technological, it's political. Imagine governments using advanced AI to forecast public behavior with incredible accuracy. They'll know when unrest is likely, when people are unhappy, even when individuals are becoming a threat before anything happens. Predictive governance.
It sounds efficient on paper, but in practice, it starts blurring the line between prevention and preemptive control. You might never see a dramatic moment where liberties are taken away. Instead, you see subtle changes, restrictions disguised as improvements, monitoring disguised as security, policies disguised as optimizations. That's how liberties disappear, not with force, but with automation. And then there's the corporate side of this story. Companies will use AI not only to understand the market, but to shape it. If AI becomes responsible for setting prices, predicting trends, and deciding what products people are most likely to buy, it gains enormous influence over human decisions. And if only a few companies control the most powerful AI models, those companies essentially control economic gravity. In the worst case, economies don't collapse.